Guys, welcome back to the channel. Racer X here, and today I'm back with my good buddies at Clay Cooley Dodge Jeep Chrysler Ram in Irving. Of course, they've got their beautiful Chevy store right next door. I'm actually borrowing a car from each dealership. Today I want to make a little comparison between a couple of cars that I get asked about all the time. It is the two most popular trims of our beloved Mustang and also of the Challenger. It is the V6. Yes, it is the Ecoboost and also the V6 in the Charger. And a lot of people want to know, how do those two cars really stack up against each other? Well, today you're going to find out. I got both cars for you. It should be a fun one. If you're new to my channel, please do me a huge favor and subscribe. Only 22% of you guys at home are subscribed to this channel, and I would really appreciate it. Lots of great content coming up for you this year, and here we go.
T-minus 15 seconds.
And here are the two cars directly behind me. As you can see, that is the Ford Mustang Ecoboost. And over here in that beautiful F8 green, I do have the Dodge Charger. That is the SXT trim. You can see the hood does not look like the Hemis. That's the only trim where you get that type of hood. So anyway, how do these two cars really compare against each other? These are the two most popular or most sold trims out there in both of their respective brands. So I would say it's interesting to go ahead and compare the two cars. So I want to give you a look. We'll talk a little bit about the specs of the two, and then maybe I'll even take them for a drive for you. So let's talk a little bit about the power plants in these two awesome vehicles. Of course, in the Charger SXT, this is their Pentastar V6. This is essentially their base engine that comes in this. They do put this engine in a lot of their vehicles, Dodge does, and Chrysler, but it's quite a proven engine. 292 horsepower, right around 260 pound-feet of torque on this. And then, of course, this thing weighs about 3,850 pounds. As we jump over here to the Ecoboost, the Mustang, things change quite a bit. This is an inline four-cylinder, but it is turboed, 310 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. So a lot more torque out of the Mustang. That's what turbos kind of do for you. So you're comparing a naturally aspirated car, whether it's the Charger or the Challenger, versus a turbo car. But these two cars really base out very similar in price. This is about 3,700 pounds. So the Mustang is about 150 pounds lighter. And as I mentioned, the horsepower is very close, but in terms of torque, the Mustang does make a lot more. But how will that translate when I actually go to drive these? I guess we will see. So on these base level vehicles, you do get some tires that are more than adequate for the amount of power that these two cars make. You do get 245s here on the Charger. You get 235s on the Mustang. But the funny thing about this is the next trim level up, when you talk about either the Mustang GT or you go over here to the 5.7 or even the Scat Pack on the Hemis, they still come with that same 245 width tire, which is kind of amazing. But these tires actually are more than adequate for this amount of power, and they ride quite nicely. So as we look at the interior of the Mustang, you can see it is nicely appointed. I did go with a premium trim in both of these two cars to compare them, and you can see a very neutral driving position. Beautiful leather seats here. You've got your cup holders right in the center where you would expect them to be. A really nice instrumentation panel on this car. A little bit more of an old school look in here, but still a really nice place to sit, kind of that aluminum or that brushed aluminum finish on the interior of this. It is a lot smaller in here. You can see you sit a little closer to your passenger. And then, of course, over here, the back seats are actually quite small in the back of the Mustang. But you could put somebody really little in the back of this, and things change quite a bit over on the Charger. And the Charger, as you would expect, is a little bit roomier car. You can see this one also has a neutral driving position. Instrumentation looks somewhat similar. You can see the cup holders in this particular one in the Charger are kind of side by side versus the Mustang, where they're kind of stacked on top of each other long ways. And then, of course, you do have some storage here in the middle, which you would like. And of course, the great thing about the Charger, it is a four-door, and of course, you do get these big, beautiful back seats, leather appointed on both these cars, as I mentioned to you before. But the door and window controls on both of these are really right where you would expect them to be. Visibility in this car is going to be a little bit better than it is in the Mustang. It's just a bigger, longer car. So now from an aesthetics perspective, I mean, these two cars really do look quite different. Yes, you do have a two-door versus a four-door. And also some people may say, hey, look, you know, why didn't you compare the Challenger? But I mean, really both the Charger and the Challenger come with that same Pentastar in there. So I still feel like this is a fairly, you know, accurate comparison, but you can tell that the Mustang sits considerably lower when you see the two cars next to each other. The front grille, obviously quite a bit different on these two cars. Kind of give you a quick look at that. The Mustang kind of has those really slanted headlights versus the Charger, I should say, which has kind of more of a neutral looking headlight. Really nice black grille on that. I kind of love the contrast with this F8 green and the black. And then of course, red and black, one of my favorites as well. If you go around to the rear of the cars, you can definitely tell that they look a little bit different as well. You can see the Mustang does have a very understated spoiler right here, but it does look quite nice from the back. You do get single exhaust tips on this particular trim. And on the Charger side, you can see you do kind of get these traditional Charger tail lights here. Of course, there's no mistaking it is a Dodge. They put that all over the back. You do kind of get this chrome here in the rear. I will mention that those are kind of the false tips, if you will. They do have smaller tips that are like way up in there, kind of hard to see, but that's just kind of what they do on this particular trim level. But no spoiler on this particular one. You can get optional spoilers on these. But now I'm actually aboard the Ford Mustang Ecoboost, and I have to admit, obviously, this is a cockpit that I'm very used to. I drive a Mustang GT, but I'm also familiar with the Charger. Obviously, I had my Hellcat, and even in the base trims, I mean, these things really do feel very similar when you sit on the inside of them. Very comfortable place to sit in the Mustang. I have to admit, from a headroom perspective, certainly a lot less in this one than in the Charger. But in terms of the way these EcoBoosts drive, I have to admit, yes, this is the base level trim in the Ford Mustang, but it actually is quite capable. I mean, they say that this thing will run like high 13s in the quarter mile, and 0 to 60 is like 5.1 seconds. That's actually really impressive considering how much power this makes. But as I did mention before, it makes quite a bit of torque, 350 pound-feet of torque, and it weighs right at 3,700 pounds. So when you're coming out of a little corner like this and you go to get on it, you can really feel the torque on this little car come in quite nicely. It's not too bad. Now, one of the things that I've always really liked about the EcoBoost, and really turbo cars in general when they come turboed from the factory, is with just a tune, it really makes these cars come alive. When you're talking about a car that already makes 310 horsepower out of a four-cylinder nonetheless, yes, there is a little turbo, and that's really what makes it great, because with just a tune, you can really hop these things up, and they make a fair amount of power. They can actually scare other cars on the road that are very, you know, it seems so unassuming to just have your base level Mustang, but like I said, when you breathe on these things a little bit, they can actually be pretty formidable on the street. It's kind of impressive. Now, one other little interesting fact about the EcoBoost is because it is so torquey, like from a torque perspective, you really don't feel that much difference between, say, like the GT and this particular trim, because this one is not naturally aspirated. So when I'm just cruising along that initial tip in, it feels, there it goes, it feels pretty substantial. And that, you know, there's something to be said for that. Of course, once you kind of get moving, that's when the GT really comes alive. That Coyote motor is so formidable. But I will say that just on initial tip in, the EcoBoost does surprise you a little bit. So yeah, I'm actually a big fan of it. Like I said, the power to weight in this is pretty good. You do feel the torque come in really nice, and really not a whole lot of bad things to say about this trim. I mean, and the great thing is about it is that this one is really the one that's made for the masses. I mean, you know, this is the one they sell the most of, probably always will. It's certainly the cheapest. And I mean, I think a base price, you get these somewhere around $33,000. So not too shabby on the Mustang EcoBoost. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in the Charger and see if I feel a really big difference in how it drives. So now I am aboard the Charger SXT, and I will say, this car drives really, really smooth, and I really do like it. It is a distinctive difference between the two cars in terms of just comfort level. And it's not that the Mustang is uncomfortable, because it is pretty comfortable, but the Charger, that's kind of what it's known for. I mean, it is a bigger car, it's got a longer wheelbase on it, but it really does ride nice and comfy. The seats are nice and big and plush. Like I said, the passenger you sit a little further away from. You do have the really nice big back seats in this, so certainly if you have more than one passenger, this is going to be the much more comfortable car to drive. And I will say, you know, this car, you can tell when you drive them. It's just not as fast as the Mustang. It doesn't feel as sporty. It just isn't that. So the Mustang is just a faster car. As I mentioned, 0 to 60, significantly faster in the Mustang. Certainly a quarter mile is a full second faster in the Mustang, which is quite a bit. So if you're more performance oriented, and that's really your main focus, and this trim level, probably that's not what you're looking at, but the Mustang is just a more capable car. But when it comes to comfort, this Charger is fantastic, and this is probably the most comfortable trim that they make. The RTs, they've got, of course, the SRTs, or now the Scat Pack, the Hellcat, all of them. This is probably the most livable for daily use. So if you're like the average person and you're not a gearhead like me, this trim has more than enough power for you. I mean, you're approaching 300 horsepower. And what's interesting about that is one of my favorite cars from a while back is the Trans Am, right? And the non-Ram Air Trans Ams made like 200, they were rated at 290 horsepower. They were underrated, but at any rate, it's kind of interesting how far they've come with the technology. Now your average run-of-the-mill Pentastar actually makes more horsepower than those like 2002 Trans Ams did. And you can definitely feel, I mean, when you go to step on it, here it comes. It's not like the thing's a race car, but I mean, it definitely gets out of its own way. And I mean, like I said, with the comfort factor of this, yeah, really, really good. So if you're out there trying to race people in your 6-cylinder, whether it's a GT, which makes slightly more power than this, but not a lot, or your SXT, and you're trying to race EcoBoost Mustangs, you're probably going to lose. I mean, it just isn't as fast. Whether it's a Charger or a Challenger, it's just not as fast as an EcoBoost. But from a comfort and like an everyday driving perspective, this one is absolutely fantastic. So both cars certainly have their merits. And that is about it for my comparison of the Charger SXT versus the Ford Mustang Ecoboost. Both of these are big sellers for their particular brands. And of course, they both ride really, really great. If you're just your average person out there running around, as I mentioned before, these things have more than adequate power. The great trim, obviously you're going to get a much better price on these than you will in the upper level trims. They're a little bit easier to get a hold of and get a deal on, which is also great. And all around, I mean, they're just really nice cars to drive. I do recommend driving both of them. If you're on the fence, drive both of them, see what's going to work out for you. Obviously, the Charger is going to have a lot more room in it, a little bit more sporty feel on the Mustang, but they're both absolutely great. So go take a look at both of them if you're considering buying them. That's really the only way to do it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and I will catch you on the next one. So until then, Racer X.